Welcome, everybody, to week 5 of the Age of Discovery course. I'm excited. Today will be a little bit different because we'll be talking about the innovations and inventions and technologies that helped propel the Age of Discovery forward, that gave these navigators and explorers the tools they needed to go where they needed to go or to create the maps they needed in order to be able to find where they needed to go, or the people who found them. We'll talk about a lot of instruments, a lot of people, a lot of technologies, a lot of methods. Um, should be interesting because as soon as we jump into, um, let's see. Oh, I forgot to adjust something. Sorry. Okay. I usually close the chat for the meeting. So, Jocelyn, thank you for that. There's someone called. We're just talking. So before class started, we were talking about magicians, um, and magicians that teach us how to do magic, and maybe they're not true magicians because they're breaking the magician code. Anyway, there is a comment about following up on that conversation in the chat. So, um, anyway, thank you for that. So today, we'll be talking about those instruments and things. But as soon as we jump back into the Last Crusade, starting today, we'll be jumping back into that immediately, almost. They'll start talking about some of these instruments, talking about how they used them, how they made decisions based on the readings they were getting from these instruments. And so we immediately will see the effect of these things. And I think it'll be nice to have a better understanding and sort of a background of what those instruments do so that as we're reading, they use their astrolabe to do this. We'll have a better understanding of what that instrument is, how it's used, the pros and cons of it, maybe, and then will just help us as we read and learn about these things. So that's what we'll be doing today. Let me start sharing my screen. I'm excited for this discussion. I apologize. So I am using a different setup today. So hopefully things will work out on my end. I am in Utah. My grandmother passed away. Let's see. Show meeting. Yeah, hold on. Okay. Is my screen sharing? Okay. Sorry. I couldn't tell. Different computer setup. So my grandmother passed away last week, and so I am in Utah this week to attend her funeral. She was a wonderful woman, so it's more of a celebration. And my grandfather, her husband, passed away several years ago, and they had a wonderful love, like a storybook relationship. And so it's comforting for me to know that she's with him. And it's kind of a happy thought to think about those two together again because she missed him so much. But I'm in Utah. I flew all day yesterday to get here. And so now I'm on a different setup in my parents' basement. So I apologize if I have some technical difficulties like I just did, where I couldn't see the meeting anymore and I couldn't tell if I was sharing my screen. So anyway, I apologize if there are some technical difficulties or mishaps on my part today. So today, we will have a brief discussion, my discussion, to start with, and then we'll go through the different technologies that propelled the age of discovery. And as you remember, I asked you to sign up, and so when it gets to, we'll have different slides for the different technologies. For example, the caravel, the carrick, Latin cells. When it gets to the part that you did your research on, I will ask you, excuse me, to unmute yourself and tell us what you learned. I think there are 3 people that did the caravel, 3 people that did the carrick, one on the Latin cells. And if you didn't sign up or if you didn't indicate what you did your research on, maybe you can just let us know when we get to that slide. Grace, go ahead.
Hi. So I just wanted to let you know that I didn't actually like let you know, and I wrote one with my brother. So,
Okay, sounds great. When we get to that slide, you guys can just speak up. And if other people didn't sign up specifically and you didn't do the research,
mm,
shame on you. but you can just sit back and enjoy today, I
Yeah.
guess.
I'm gonna have my brother read the paper. So
Okay,
Represent.
very
represent. Yeah.
cool.
Okay.
Great delegation there. Letting Will do the work. Nice. Very cool. All right. So we'll start off with my discussion. We'll go through the technologies. Next week, our readings will be back in the Last Crusade, chapter 7 through 11. This will take us. Vasco da Gama will leave Lisbon and he will arrive by chapter 11. He'll arrive in India and he'll start um, doing his things by chapter 11. It's pretty exciting. Um, these are stories, I think, growing up in America, we learned a little bit about Vasco da Gama, maybe, when I was growing up, a little bit about Vasco da Gama, enough to know that his name was familiar to me. And Magellan, I knew, circumnavigated the globe. Most of the Age of Discovery stuff that I learned growing up was Christopher Columbus. So I think this is a super important part of the Age of Discovery. I'm excited for you to see the story or read the story and learn about Vasco da Gama. And decide, was he a hero? Was he a good guy? We'll learn. That'll be something we talk about for the next 2 weeks as we continue in this book. Also, just note after chapter 11, we will be pretty selective on which chapters we read from here on out. So don't read ahead. Just wait until the reading assignments are handed out the week of the homework because we might be skipping a chapter here and there based on different things that are the book starts going into some of the things that Da Gama and his men were doing that really aren't that aren't a big part of the Age of Discovery and maybe aren't that relevant for our class. So we'll be skipping over some of those things. Grace, go ahead.
Hi. So I was wondering where the book list is for the rest of the semester.
Yeah, it's on the Mighty Networks app. I'll repost it just so it's easier to find. But I
Okay.
think it might be if you go to our class page, it might be at the very bottom. It might have its own link to click on.
Okay.
But it's only two more books after this. So the next one is The Four
Okay.
Voyages of Christopher Columbus by
Mhm.
Lawrence Berggren, I think, or Bergreen, can't remember. And then the other one is the Over the Edge of the World or Over the Edge of the Earth. I think I'll have to look it up, but it's also by Lawrence Bergreen about Magellan and his trip around the globe. First guy to do it. Um,
Thank you.
you bet. So it's just those two. It's crazy. This is the first time I've taught a semester class that's 16 weeks, and we're already in week 5. We're almost a third of the way done. So we're moving pretty quickly. Um, and we only have two more books. All right. Announcements next week. I had to cancel office hours yesterday because I was flying to Utah. Next week we will be back to normal. So if you have any questions, want to discuss anything further, if you're working on um, Admiral of the Sea track project and you have some questions or want to check in, office hours next week. Um, I had the same discussion point last week. This is just sort of a reminder of what we're doing now. So we've learned about Marco Polo and everything that exists in India. We learned about Prester John and the different attempts to try and track down this Prester John, who is sort of mythical, sort of real. Real in that there was a Christian king that lived in Ethiopia, mythical because everything that they thought they knew about him basically was false, other than he was a Christian king. Um, but that was a big motivation to continue to try and find this um, way around to India so that they could join forces with Prester John and go and retake Jerusalem, if you remember. The fall of Constantinople over here in Turkey closed off the land route to India and started to make everything really expensive. And then Bartolomeo Diaz and Pero de Covilla found that there were a lot of things in India. So Pero de Covilla found a lot of cool things in India that were worth getting there it is worth going to India because the spices are so much cheaper. Um, Bartolomeo Diaz, if you remember, found the Cape of around a way around the Cape of Good Hope down here in Africa. So now, starting this week, chapter 7, immediately we'll jump into how Vasco da Gama was selected for the job. And then his trip follows this black line um, all the way down here around. And by the end of chapter 11, we'll be in Calicut in India. So this is what you have to look forward to. The journey takes him a little bit more than 10 months to go from Lisbon here to Calicut here. And I was just listening to the book, re-listening to portions of it last night as I was flying. I just thought, how crazy is it? I left Lisbon yesterday morning at 10 a.m. Lisbon time. So I woke up an hour outside of Lisbon, drove my car to the airport, and then that night I was eating dinner in Utah with my sister. Just how times have changed, right? It took Vasco da Gama 10 months to get from Lisbon to Calicut here, and it took me 16 hours to get from Lisbon to Utah. Just pretty crazy how the technology, how the world and life has changed. Um, I'm glad I didn't have to load up a whole ship full of supplies to last me 3 years like this crew did, so that I could make it to a funeral back home. Just totally different way the world has changed. All right. So with that, let's jump into the technologies that made this all possible. I think there are three of you that signed up for the Caravel. I'm not sure if anyone wants to volunteer to go first of the three, or if you know who the others are, um, we could discuss. But let's hear about the Caravel. Who would like to tell us about the Caravel? Gemma, go ahead.
My video isn't working, so I won't be able to have that on. But so I worked on this project with Vera, and the stuff I researched was a lot about like the structure of the boat part, not necessarily the sails, but like the whole of the boat. Um and the way they made it was really interesting to learn about. I forgot what the word was, but it was a certain planking method, and all of the boats were unique. Like none of them were looked like each other at all because they didn't back then have like blueprints to follow or anything or instructions. So they were all around the same size, but no two were like all. And they would take these planks and they would like round them and smooth them down a bunch so it like made it really tight and really small, so it was able to travel along like really rough shallow waters, which was one of the reasons why it was really ideal for the age of discovery and the explorers that used it.
Excellent. So what were some of the limitations of a Caravel? Did you run across that? Or maybe the others, Vera and Addison, if you want to chime in, add any additional information to the Caravel. Go ahead. Yeah, and for this portion, you guys don't need to raise your hand. You can just speak up and chime in if you want. If you did research on this on the topic.
Okay. So one of the limitations of the Caravel that I learned, it didn't, since it was like pretty small and was able to, go fast over like, or go in like rivers and whatnot, it didn't have a lot of cargo space, and it couldn't take a lot of men that like, versus like another popular ship at the time, the Carrack, could. It held um, like 20 tons at the beginning. I can't quite remember now, but so it just had like limited cargo space.
Excellent. Great. Is
Um,
oh, go ahead.
oh, sorry. um, I focused more on like the sails. So the triangular sails were called Latin sails. That just means triangular sails. And they basically just helped like allow the ships to be able to sail closer to the wind is how they phrased it. And it just made it more like maneuverable and faster. Well, not faster. I don't know. It just made it more maneuverable for travel.
Awesome. Excellent. So what do you guys think of the Caravel? Was it a good ship? Do you think that they needed to improve it? Do you think that they should have stuck with it instead of moving on to the Carrack? What are your thoughts on the Caravel overall?
I think that they needed like the Caravel help improve ships throughout history. So yeah.
Yeah, it was a smaller ship, like what you guys said. They had interesting techniques for creating it so that they could use maybe less wood, but it could still be watertight. They could move along the water fast. They were shallow. They had a shallow draft. So that means when it was full, it wasn't like super deep into the water, right? So that allowed them, as they were exploring down the African coast, they could go up into rivers a little bit. They could go into much shallower water and still maneuver and navigate without getting stuck on a sandbar or getting stuck. And we'll learn about this that it becomes a problem with bigger ships is that they run into sandbars that they did not see and weren't expecting to be there. And so oftentimes they get really lucky because they run onto a sandbar at low tide. They wait a few hours till the tide goes come low tide. Yeah, tide comes back in, so that at high tide they can get their boat off of the sandbar. But that was something they didn't run into very often with the Caravel because it was had such a shallow draft. Um, so it was ideal for exploring the coast of Africa, the rivers, getting to know that area. But at some point, they don't want to follow the coast anymore. And these caravels were not great at going out into the open ocean. I mean, they could do it, but they just did not have the same properties as bigger ships that could go out and face the storms better. Um, Excellent. Any additional points you guys want to talk about the Caravel before we move on? Good job. Anything interesting or insights that you found as you did your research? Christopher, go ahead.
I think it's super cool how they combined the square and the triangular sails.
Yeah. Yeah, and traditionally the Caravel had most of the triangle or Latin cells, and maybe this is actually a picture of a carrack. Now that I've looked at it a little closer, because the carrack is one that really combined them both. Um, and I think at some point in history, the Caravel, in its evolution to become a carrack, I think there is probably this area in between where it's like, is it a carrack? Is it a caravel? As they started to shift their way of thinking, shift their shipbuilding techniques and tactics. And it's interesting that um, they would get feedback from pilots, feedback from navigators on these ships that, and they would just kind of update them and build them and change some of the tactics as they are building them. Pretty interesting stuff. And a lot of technology that goes into making these things go. It's not just putting wood together and going out onto a raft like what we could do in our backyards. There's a lot of technique that went into them. And I'll have to maybe as we talk about the carrack next, I will have to look up. I'll grab a couple of pictures. So there is a museum in Spain called the Wharf of the Caravels, and they have two caravels, the Nina and the Pinta, and then they have a carrack, the Santa Maria. These are like replica boats of what Columbus used to go across the ocean, and two of them were caravels. One was a carrack, and they were not big. they were a lot smaller than I expected because we see movies, right, of like Pirates of the Caribbean and other movies where you have these big boats that are going across the water. And so you picture how large they are, that they had all these like sword fights and stuff going on, and the actual boats themselves, I was shocked at how small they actually felt when you were on them. Um, and these were considered huge back then for boats. And so it's just interesting. Christopher, go ahead.
Yeah, the Santa Maria is like as long as a bus. So like it's really not that big.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Shockingly smaller than I expected. Um, I mean, still big, I guess, compared to what they would have had and what they were comparing it to. Little vessels that could go on rivers and things. But yeah, it's pretty crazy. Let me just, in fact, I can. Nope, I don't have it ready yet. Let me just, yeah, I'll pull something over onto my screen, see if it's still showing. And so I'm just pulling this from my Google Photos. So Paul, it might take me a second to find the one that I'm thinking of. Nope, that's at the, oh, maybe this is good. All right, so this is at the museum that I'm talking about. So on the right, I think is the Nina. On the left is the Santa Maria. So the left is a carrack. On the right is a caravel. And my family and a couple other people who have gone through Well Educated. If you guys know Benton and Breda McNabb, they came to visit us in Spain, in Portugal. We went to Spain. Let me see if I can fast forward. My internet's not going to be quick. Okay, so that is the Santa Maria. So you see the people up there. If I could rewind, the people up there, I mean, that's not that huge, right? There's three people right there on the castle in the back. And this is walking onto the Nina. So a caravel. And I don't know these people, but they're stars in this video. But as you walk onto this ship, like it's not big if I can focus in on there. That's like the part of the storage. This is where they would cook their food. People would sleep here. When they were sleeping out on the deck, when the weather was nice, the top where they were laying down was curved. And so if you could get right above the hatch that goes down into the bottom, that was, oh, sorry, this was the Santa Maria. This was the bigger one. But that square right here to go below deck, that was a very desirable place to stay. Um, but yeah, not very big. So you can see why it would be advantageous to have to jump from a caravel. Now I can't get out of this. Here we go. To go from a smaller caravel to a larger carrack, um, just would have given even more space. So speaking of carracks, there are three of you who volunteered to do the research or indicated they would do the research on the carrack. Who would like to speak first about the carrack? Even though now we've talked a little bit about it already. Braden, go ahead.
Okay. Sorry, my video is not working right now. It's black. Like I can turn it on and off, but it doesn't show anything. Anyway, uh, about the carrot, I hadn't had time to write like the papers and stuff, but I did a bunch of research. It was kind of similar to the Caravel, but it was a bigger, and the it had a really high stern castle and forecastle. It had like two or three masts, and the front two would have square sails, while the back one would have a triangular sail. I and then it was it was bigger and it had a lot more room for storage, and it was meant more for open seas and less of like shore exploration like the Caravel was. And it had a wider and broader hull, and it was like just bigger and everything, but it was also a lot slower. But that's like you said, that's the ship that Columbus used. And also a lot of other explorers use and stuff. And yeah, uh,
Excellent. Yeah, it will make its debut when I guess so Columbus had sailed before Vasco da Gama did, but it makes its debut with Columbus, and then it becomes the ship once Vasco da Gama uses it, it becomes sort of the main ship for all of these longer voyages, longer explorations. Christopher, go ahead.
I have a model of the Santa Maria in my room, and it's a carrack, and it's super, super cool, super detailed. I need to show you that sometime, but it's so fun.
Awesome. Excellent. Yeah, please you take pictures of us or make a video that you can share on the Mighty Networks and show us all about it. That's awesome. Daniel, your hand was raised for a second. Is it
Yeah, I wanted to ask him if he could just show us it now. Yeah.
if you can, if
I'm
it's a model, it might be difficult to pull up on screen.
I'm out of state. I'm away from my home, so
Ah, nice.
Oh.
When
Oh,
you get back.
always next time.
Exactly. Exactly. Braden, that was great. David and James, do you want to add anything about the Carrack that you guys?
Yeah, sure. So in this picture, you can kind of see that like how deep it is. Like it sat in the water a lot deeper because just how like tall it was. And so that allowed it to like carry a lot more cargo than like a caravel. And I tried to find like how much cargo it could carry, and it's kind of hard because none of the ships were alike, and it was just hard to do research. But I found some that were like 300 to 400 tons of cargo, and some of the larger ones I've heard like there was accounts of 2,000 tons, like it could carry 2,000 tons of cargo, which is just crazy for like how small the ship is.
Yeah,
But just and also it's sitting deeper in the water, it was a lot more like stabler in like harsh water.
nice. And because of the shape, it could take that cargo and stay afloat. Um, yeah, awesome. Great. James, anything you want to add?
Yeah. So you kind of mentioned how after Vasco da Gama went to India, it was used a lot. And the name Carrack kind of has a long history through different languages, but it kind of traces back to Arabic, meaning merchant ship. So it was primarily used for merchandise, but because it was able to carry so much weight and because of the forecastle and stern castle, it was also utilized to mount lots of cannons on it so that they could use it in naval warfare. But some of the drawbacks was the Carrack was since it sat so deep in the water, it couldn't turn very well, and they had to frequently dry dock it to repair the hull from woodworms, which would rot it out and then it'd start leaking, and so the sailors would have to pump it out. So that was kind of the Carrack. David and Braden covered a lot of it.
Excellent. Yeah, you guys collected. That's awesome. I'm so impressed with the research everyone's doing. Um, it was very difficult to move because it was so deep, and because it was deep, it was exposed to a lot more water. I mean, naturally, there's just more surface area, and there were so many issues with, and we'll read about this. It becomes a huge problem, and some of the solutions are going to be talked about today when we get to those. But sea worms were terrible. They get in to the wood and just start eating the wood. Um, and it would turn the boats into almost sieves. So they would just have constant leaks. As James was mentioning, they'd have to pump it out. So you had these bilge pumps. As water gets into the bottom of the boat, people could run these pumps and it would take the water out. And so one of the problems as these voyages go on longer and longer and the men get sick and they have scurvy and they can't get up and do a lot of work, one of the problems is that ships need someone to pump it. Pumping it takes energy. Nobody has energy, and so these ships are really like kind of sinking low into the water. And as they make their way back home, it really becomes a struggle to take all of this merchandise, all of the cargo they're holding, being sick, and just trying to get these ships back home. So they come up with other technologies that we'll talk about to try and protect the whole of the boat. Whole meaning all down here on the bottom, um, and what they would do to try and prevent those worms and to make the wood last longer. And then what would they do if they had to stop and repair? How did they do that? Daniel, go ahead.
When I heard you say that it was hard to come back, I was thinking, of course it was hard to come back. Pirates. Are there, but then I thought, are there pirates in the Age of Exploration?
There are, and honestly, the half of the world thinks that Vasco da Gama is a pirate. So pirate is really who are you for or who are you against? Because Vasco da Gama goes over to India, they take over a bunch of cities, kick out the Islamic people from those cities, and then eventually they're retaken back over and Portugal sort of leaves. And so the Indian history of this, they view Portugal as the Portuguese pirates kind of coming over and taking over these cities, and then eventually they were able to kick them out. So yeah, there's pirates, people all over the place that are trying to intercept these large cargoes. And that's why having the Carrack was advantageous because you could have more guns, you could protect yourself. Naval warfare starts changing instead of like they would bombard another ship, but then really you would just sort of pull up next to them, jump on, and go and fight them with swords. We'll talk about some of the bombards and things that begin coming into play. And so naval battles start changing because the ships can now carry a lot more guns, and they
Yeah.
can fire at each other across the water and things. So it's yeah, there's pirates. It's something to be concerned about for sure. Will, go ahead.
So, sorry. I went to a Renaissance fair recently in Utah, and I was interested because they also like were selling a bunch of things Renaissance related, like medieval, but they were also doing some pirate stands, so I was interested. So I like searched up when was the medieval times. It was about from the uh fifth like the 1400s to the 1600s, and pirates was about that time as well. So I yeah, there's it's a very interesting because there's definitely going to be pirates, which
Yeah.
I thought was cool.
Yeah, and there's always going to be people wanting free money, right? And so if you're out there in a boat and you know how to fight really well and you can go and take over one of these ships that are coming back full of cinnamon and spices, um, yeah. Hey,
Yeah, even today there's
I
still
appreciate all of these things
still
flying across
pirates.
my screen. Let's take it easy. I'm getting distracted. I think I said this in my World War II class, but the reactions are fun. I get distracted really easily. My old mind sees like a moving thing on my screen, like, oh, what's that? What's that? So
Old?
let's take it easy with the pirate the pirate flags and the clapping and all of that stuff. I'm getting distracted by it. So thank you for taking care of this old guy's brain and letting me focus.
How are you old?
I'm
You look young.
oh, well, thank you, Daniel. I'll add 5 points to your writing assignment for saying that. Sorry, we're running out of time. I've got to get out of there. I keep talking a lot, adding to these things, but let's move on to the Latin cells. Christopher, what did you learn about Latin cells?
Okay, so I had a lot of fun learning about Latin cells. Um, so it's so crazy to me because like for hundreds of years, people have been using the square cell, it's like better to move cargo and everything, and it can move bigger ships, you know? But like it's you have to have the wind right at your back to be able to move, you know? And the really cool with the Latin sails is that um it really like you can go into the wind and you can just tack, and it's just so amazing to me. I tried to find out who invented it because that's like awesome, but no, it doesn't say who exactly invented it. But yeah.
That's cool. I mean, it could have easily been just someone that I have a triangle piece of cloth and I need to have a sail. Let's put this up there and see what happens. And then suddenly they're like, whoa. So the wind, you're going into the wind, but the wind can sort of curl around the sails and fill up the sails and still propel you forward instead of, if you had square sails and the wind is right in front of you, there's a chance that the wind would take the square sail and start pushing you backwards, right? And so they would have to take the sails down and they would just be sitting in the water waiting for the wind to be favorable. But with these Latin sails, they could put up the triangle sail and it would still propel them forward slower. It definitely was not as fast as a square sail with the wind at your back, but it would allow you to still move forward. You wouldn't just have to sit out in the middle of the ocean waiting, waiting for a wind to come. Daniel, go ahead.
Uh, so, I don't know I don't remember where I heard this, but I think that the Latin sails came from the natives.
They very well could have. Uh, Absolutely a possibility. It could have come from people in the Middle East. It could have come from anywhere. I'll have to look into that. That sounds interesting. Um, yeah, Christopher, go ahead.
Yeah, so I kind of was like thinking of how to explain like how Latin cells work. And I was thinking like, when you're in the car and you roll down the window and you put out your hand and you can kind of like do this with the wind. So like when the wind goes like this, it somehow like makes it go forward, you know? So it's just pushing you forward. And that's how they would do it. They would tack back and forth to go in right into the wind. And I don't know. I think that's just so cool.
Absolutely. And like it goes against the physics that they, not against the physics. It went against their common belief that you had to have the wind at your back. It opened the door for a lot of exploration. Um, Awesome, awesome improvement. And so, as we were talking about, the caravels had more Latin cells. Carracks would use bigger square cells, but they also would include Latin cells in the back so that on a day where they didn't have a wind behind them, they could still move along and use the headwinds to help navigate. Cool, good job. All right, next is, whoops, hull sheathing. Seemed like who did that one? Truman, go ahead. Tell us a little bit about it.
So, I didn't manage to look up much stuff about it, but I did learn a few things. Um, but what they would do is they would what what the problem was that like they had the wood wouldn't like the boats wouldn't last long because of the worms and all that sort of stuff. So they had to use the copper, and if I remember correctly, they put the copper on the inside to sort of make sure it would still float and all that. But it wasn't just copper. They 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 would sometimes use other stuff if copper wasn't available. Like sometimes they'd use tar, I believe.
Hmm.
And like maybe some other stuff that I'm trying to remember.
Yeah,
I like I said, I only really watched one video about it. Um, but I did see like how they would use a bunch of copper and sometimes tar and all that sort of stuff.
absolutely. And you caught it. That is the innovation, right? So they
Mhm.
have barnacles that could grow that would slow them down. They would have worms that would get into the wood that would cause them to leak. Algae, different things would start growing, and so they started to add protective layers to the ships. Copper, sometimes lead. Sometimes they would soak wood in tar so that it would become impermeable to the water and that the worms would be less likely to get into it. And so that was one of the technologies that to us probably seems like, well, yeah, you do that. That seems makes obvious that you'd want to do that. At that time, it was a new innovation that they were working on, adding protective layers to the wood to help it last longer on these really long voyages. So
Fast
that
forward a few hundred years, then we get ironclads.
exactly, exactly. Um, and so I mean it became obsolete as you get away from wooden ships. But even today, when they create wooden ships, they have a lot of different coatings and things they add to the outside to make it to protect the wood from the environment, protect the wood from the harsh ocean environment. So that is the whole sheathing that helped him go a little further without having to stop for repairs. But they still would have to stop for repairs. So we are on to the careening, and this is I think Will and Grace. Go ahead, Will.
Um, I'm kind of loving this, so be prepared. I wrote a 2-page assignment, and I also got some pictures of Creedy, but sadly I can't show you that. But I am just gonna read it to you. Okay. So basically, during the Age of Sail, from the 16th to the 18th centuries, um, before they introduced copper sheathing, they would have to careen a ship, which is either pulling a ship at high tide onto shore and letting the tide go out and then tipping it over by using anchors and ropes on purpose to tip it over, and then they'd go and they'd clean it all off, as you can see in the picture, and then they'd have to redo it on the other side. And they also had healing cleaning, which would they fi- which they would find sheltered bays to anchor it all down, get scaffolding out, and then tip it over in the water on its side and get off that side, turn the boat around, do the other side. And it's very fascinating because it took a lot of hard work. It took from days to even weeks to do it at a time. And I think it's really interesting because pirates even had to do cleaning, and they were well known for doing cleaning in hidden bays, because a lot of times if they didn't do it properly, the boat could be destroyed from all the unsolved weight, and they would be left there on shore with all their stuff, and they'd be vulnerable to pirates who want to come take over them and take all their stuff, or even local tribes on the islands. So I just think that's very cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And it becomes a huge part of I mean that is a big reason why you would want the whole sheathing so that you had to do this less because you were so vulnerable. That's interesting aspect of it of you're suddenly on like you are a standing still target for a an enemy. You can't move. And but it was something that became necessary. So you'll read in the few chapters, Vasco da Gama, when he gets around the Cape of Good Hope, they have to look for a good place to careen their ship, to repair it, to continue on their voyage.
Yeah.
And and it is such a hard thing. That also goes back to when they were all sick and out of energy and out of food, out of supplies, out of fresh water, and their ship is letting in a lot of water. They don't have energy to pump it out. What they need to do is stop and careen their ship, but it takes so much effort and energy and manpower that they just they can't. And so this is something that they would do to keep. This is how they would create sort of a dry dock.
Yeah.
Now we have things where ships can pull into a port, into like a slip, and then they close up the thing, drain the water out, and then lift the ship so that it's out of the water. That was this is the Age of Discovery version of that to repair the bottom of their ship.
Yeah. But if they didn't do that, it would be very hard to like it'd be very hard to move around, and that and it'd be way slower, so their travels would take longer. And another thing is they would usually have to take like tar or stuff like that to patch holes, or else it could leak. And it was a very hard process for them.
Yeah,
This was
yeah.
all also during the age of sail, is what it's called.
Oh,
So
nice.
they used,
The age of sail, before we started using motorized boats.
yeah,
Uh, cool. That's awesome. So when you guys read about that, a lot of times the book will just say in a sentence or two, they had to stop here and careen or find a bay where they could careen their ship and repair it. And now you'll have a better understanding of what that meant. It wasn't just a oh, let's pull over and scrape the bottom of the boat. It was a big deal and required a lot of effort. Thanks, Will, and Grace for your support in the background. Awesome. Let's go on to I can't even there. Abraham Zakuru. Who was it that did Abraham or researched his? Let's see. I'm not finding it. Oh, is Addie? Addie's not here. All right, we'll skip Abraham Zacuto, and we'll talk about him next week. Pedro Nunes, who researched Pedro?
That was me.
Anna, excellent.
Okay, so Pedro Nunes was born in Portugal in 1502. Not a lot is known about his early life, and especially about his parents. I couldn't find anything about them. The earliest account of him was his attending the University of Salamanca in Spain from 1517 to 1522. And there he learned about cosmography, which is the study, the science that deals with the universe. So Earth, astronomy, geography, geology, all of that. So he studied that, math, and a lot of his main thing was math throughout his whole career and everything that he did. He did a lot of algebra and geometry and was working to find out how those related to navigation. So that was kind of his thing. So after graduating from the university, he got a degree in medicine, which he also studied while he was there. And he was known for inventing a lot of different instruments that would be used throughout the Age of Discovery. I was really surprised to find that none of them were very useful. Only a couple of them were actually successful and worked. But throughout all of that, he inspired so many other people to reinvent what he tried to create. And that led to a lot of other inventions that actually worked. So one of the instruments that did work was the nonius, and it was a lot like the astrolabe, but it was made to get more accurate readings of the stars and it was just more so it was more correct than the astrolabe. So that's one of them that was used a lot throughout the Age of Discovery. And another one was the nautical ring. This was also very similar to the astrolabe, mainly in how it was made, like the mechanics were very similar, but there were a lot of flaws with that one, so it wasn't really used. Um, and so after he tried and failed to make a lot of these instruments, he became a professor at the University of Coimbra in Portugal from 1544 to 1562. And there he taught about algebra and geometry. And going back to what he had learned at school was how they applied to navigation. And when he was, I don't know how old he was, but at some point he became the chief royal cosmographer of Portugal, and he was appointed by King John III. And he served in that position until he died. And that was a big part. He got to inspire a lot of people doing that. So he also wrote a lot of books. He wrote 5 books, most of them, again, on algebra and geometry and math. But he, even though he didn't accomplish a lot with his inventions or stuff like that, he inspired a lot of later people to reinvent and redesign a lot of the things that he tried to accomplish.
Excellent. Great job. Yeah, he did a lot of stuff. He was doing so many things. And even though a lot of his inventions didn't work out, I think he's still considered one of the greatest navigational theorists, right? So he had theories of how something would work, tried to create a device to show how it worked, and his devices weren't working great, but his theories were accurate. And so he inspired so many people that came after him. After reading his stuff, they would have the idea and go and invent something or um, a lot of really cool stuff. Great job. I think good job, Anna. We'll have one time for one more. Um, and I'm curious, so I had a typo in how I put his name on our assignment. So Oliver, I'm hoping that you found the typo and were able to research the right guy. If not, we can skip it. I wasn't able to see your paper yet.
Oh no, yeah, I found the real name.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Sorry
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah, so his name is, I'm not sure how it's pronounced except for like his last name. It's Jacome de Mallorca. Like the J in his name is supposed to be a double L. And so he's from Mallorca, Spain, which is like a little island kind of near Africa. Um, and so he's kind of got like a crazy background. In the 1300s, there was a guy named Yehuda like Cresques or whatever, and he was a Jewish map maker from Mallorca. And his dad was the guy who made the Catalan Atlas, which was considered the Google Maps of the Middle Ages. And then, like a couple years later, there were some anti-Jewish riots, and so this Yehuda guy was forced to convert to Christianity, and he supposedly changed his name to Jacome. So that's how he got that name. Um, but then he also changed his name again to Jaume Ribes, for like no apparent reason. And then uh, he like had a lot of nicknames as well. So several years later after that, Prince Henry invited this guy to teach people how to make charts next, make maps and stuff in like his school that I think we read about earlier. And so a lot of historians think these are either two different people because they think that the Jewish Yehuda died about 100 years before Prince Henry was even born. Um, so some people think that it's the same guy who converted uh, from Judaism to Christianity, and other people just think they're two different people. But whether it was like two different guys or the same, they were the ones who really started the map making, and they made a lot of charts that were used by people like Bartholomew Diaz and Vasco da Gama when they sailed around Africa to India. And so this guy or these guys or whatever, they were the ones who were like the best map makers at the time, and they worked for Prince Henry or whatever and helped to chart the oceans.
Awesome. Yeah, brought in more science, and had accurate depicted the coastlines more accurately, ports more accurately, so that you could use a compass on his map and find precise directions using a compass. I mean, before him, a lot of the maps were more artistic, I think, and maybe they were accurate to a degree, but um, changed the approach of how maps were being generated and created, and his maps were um, really precise and really helped, as Oliver was saying, helped people like Bartolomeo Diaz and everyone later um, know how to get from one place to the other more accurately. Or when you were lost, to figure out where you were based on these maps because they were so accurate, you could find your location. The Google Maps of the Middle Ages. That's awesome. Go look up the map. Excellent. Well, we're out of time. We have a few more that we'll talk about next week. Broadside cannon placement, chip log, and sandglass. And then we had videos about the astrolabe, the cross staff, and the back staff. I was going to talk about them just a little bit more if we had time. But so we'll pick up two or three more of these inventions in class next week. And then we'll begin talking about Vasco da Gama's voyage. So if you remember, I'll post this online also. Chapters 7 through 11. If you're caught up in the story, try not to read ahead. We will be skipping some chapters that aren't as relevant to the class, or maybe they contain descriptions and things of um, just that we won't be talking about in class. Vasco da Gama and his people were not the kindest, we'll just say, to the natives, and that's just stuff we won't need to discuss in our class. I will talk about them and acknowledge what he was doing. We don't need to read chapters about it, I don't think. So just stick with our reading schedule here. 7 to, oh, wait, is that right? Yeah, it is 7 to 11. And then we'll have supplemental content learning about the people and the places that Vasco da Gama and his people encountered as they made their way around the Cape of Good Hope over into India. What did some of the places look like? How were they accepted? How were they received? What did those people look like? What were some of their customs? That's what we'll focus on with the supplemental content for next week. So thank you all for excellent papers. I'll give feedback to the papers in the next few days. Thank you for the work that you did on this. Thank you for the presentations. You guys were very well prepared. Did a great job presenting the different technologies and things you focused on. I really appreciate that. You're excellent, awesome. Keep up the good work. I'll stop sharing my screen, and that will be it for today. So, class, I'll release the homework for this week later today. Have a great rest of your week, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.